Welcome everyone to Ladder Daily Digest. We honor creators, and last time Randy and I had an episode that was called Magic to Mormonism, or to Mormon, and we aired it, and Tim Rathbone had some things to say, and so we thought we'd bring Tim on to correct the record a little bit, straighten some things out, because we teased about Tim being there at the start of Freemasonry, but he actually was at BYU when Bill Schnoebelen, or whatever his name is,
Schnoebelen,
had put out a book, and Tim was there for different things, and we'll have Tim talk about that a little bit. We're also having Debbie come and join us. Thanks, Debbie, for joining us.
Thanks.
Debbie knows a little bit about Masonry.
Just a little.
That's right.
Debbie knows a little bit about a lot of things.
So maybe, Randy, you can sort of give us a little synopsis of our show from last time, and then we'll let Tim talk.
Yeah, sure. This Bill Schnoebelen claims to be several things. First of all, a doctor. I don't know if he has his doctorate in anything, but he has put that in his title. He claims to have achieved the status of a 33rd degree Mason and the steps that he needed to take in order to get there. It was suggested to him that, first of all, he was very interested in the occult, witchcraft, white witchcraft, according to him, but also dabbled in black witchcraft, and that was part of his journey to becoming a 33rd degree Mason, along with selling his soul to the devil was a claim that he made in order to get to where he wanted to be. And one of his mentors told him that he would strongly suggest he became LDS and take what the Mormon church has to give in his road to achieving whatever his achievements were, or his goals. It never really came through exactly what his master goal was. But there were a lot of interesting points brought out. I naively, figured, well, a lot of these could very well be true. Where there's smoke, there's fire, right? So we made this video, and there were a lot of interesting things about it. However, Tim Rathbone, who is very knowledgeable and knows about everybody on the planet, said, "Hey, I know Bill. I've debated Bill, and he's basically full of manure." And
I was going to say, and Randy, you are no Bill.
Thanks for that. Tim expressed his displeasure that we gave Bill the time that we did. And I know that Deb was talking about Masonry along with Tim in the conversation. And I said, "Hey, I've got a great idea. Why don't you both come on and rebut the things that we did in this video and said in the video." And I, by the way, just as a disclaimer, both Gene and I did say this is for informational purposes. We don't necessarily buy into these claims. Don't be offended by them. This is just what he says, and we have no proof one way or the other.
Infotainment.
Yeah, but we may have proof the other way with Tim and Deb. So we invited them to come on and talk a little bit about the true factual things about Masonry and
to rebut Bill. So
yeah,
Tim, what was the first thing when you saw the show? What were you thinking?
What was I thinking? When I saw the name, I reacted immediately. That the man's a known liar. The Tanners exposed him in 1988. Because I ran across the video a few days before you did, and I started to watch it. And the minute I saw who it was and knew who it was, I went no further, because I knew everything from that point on was a lie. Because I know I knew his reputation.
How old is that guy now?
He's 72 or 73. He was born in 48. So he's a couple of years older than me. 75, I don't know.
He looks a lot older than he is.
Well, that's why I was going to say, is he still alive?
Unfortunately. And he's published a bunch of books, too, that cater to the evangelical fundamentalist Christian movements with all his lies.
How did you hear about him originally, Tim, and what led you to end up debating?
When I was at BYU and they came, well, Ed Decker and his friend who did The God Makers kind of joined up with Schnoebelen and wanted to expose the church. And so they kind of brought him along to this meeting that was in Orem, I think, Saints Alive for Jesus. And we went to this meeting and he started to tell us stuff. We just, you're a liar. You know, what you're saying isn't true. And now I realize this is the time that this was in the beginning of the 80s. According to the Tanners, it was in July of 80 that Schnoebelen joined the church. So by 83 or 84, where he says I was a member for 5 years, he was already attacking the church during this time period.
So the timelines don't match up very well.
Timelines don't match up. Not at all.
Well, he had the whole history of vampirism and Satanism, which is really, I don't think, a good candidate for the Mormon church. They're going to be a little bit more hesitant to put you in the water with that kind of background, especially during the 80s,
So, Tim, you think that he cobbled together other information and then acted as if he went through all those things and experienced those things?
Yes, because there's no such thing as a prince. Let me see.
Well, and I think during that time in the 80s is definitely when you first started hearing rumor of people criticizing the church or exposing some of the church stuff. I think they'd kind of had a nice little pause of no one really, putting them to the fire. And then you have the Tanners coming out, you have the God Makers coming out, and the Christian community coming out and saying these guys are not Christian.
I mean, he claimed to be something called the Sublime Prince of the Royal Secret from Masonry. There's no such thing. The guy claims he's a 33rd degree Mason. To become a 33rd degree Mason, you have to be a Mason for 20 to 30 years, and you're nominated by the Supreme Council in Washington, D.C. to become a 33rd degree Mason. They just don't hand it out.
Well, you would even have to be
And
invited
you have to be invited. You have to be invited to be a Mason. You have to be you don't get invited to be a Mason. You go to join, and they let you in or they don't. But he claims he's a 90th degree Mason, and there is no such degree. Everything that comes out of the man's mouth is a lie. Some of the books he quotes are real when he talks about the witch books and stuff. Some of those are real. Some of that is accurate facts. But everything else is a lie.
AI tells me that in Scottish Rite Freemasonry, the title Sublime Prince of the Royal Secret refers to the 32nd degree, also known as the Master of the Royal Secret.
Yeah, and he never was a 32nd degree. He said it was.
What was it that you said they don't even have something?
They have it, but he claimed that he got it after it was his 3rd degree. When there's entered apprentice, fellow craft, and master mason. You don't become a sublime prince until you get the 32nd degree. He didn't get the 32nd degree. He only got the first 3 degrees, if at all. I don't think he ever was a Mason. I think everything the man talks about, he learned from books.
Is the 31st degree the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air?
I don't know.
Now,
So you're saying Will Smith is not a Mason, according to rumor?
I think he was the first person to take independent research and make it sensational. I'm getting some very much like Chad Daybell Visions of Glory vibes off of like sensational storytelling. So he probably was the first one and realized there was a niche for it, obviously. It's
like when he mixes Satanism with Druidism and witchcraft. Those are separate disciplines. They're not the same. I wanted to be a Catholic priest. So the Catholic priest says, I got to go do this. I got to go to the Middle East, to India and learn all this stuff and then come back. It's like he made the whole thing up. There isn't anything that makes any sense,
Well,
and a
there's nobody.
timeline.
There's nobody in the history of Mormonism that ever just made up a whole thing, is there?
Their origin story.
The,
I don't mean
Well,
to be
he was
elementary.
trying to be like Joseph Smith, I think.
I'm
okay,
not trying
For
to be
exa-
elementary here, guys, but if we can just take a couple of big granddaddy steps backwards for the listeners who don't know, could one of you maybe just tell us what is Masonry, what its origins are, and why it exists today?
Masonry was founded in the 16 or 1700s in England as a fraternal order to take care of people, to
I was told
make
growing
men
up.
better.
I was told growing up, Tim, that and now I know that it's not true, but I was always told by church members that the Masons date back to the original Masons of Solomon's Temple, and that's why they have the true rituals that go on that Joseph Smith simply copied and improved and put into
Right.
the temples.
That's what we were told. Yes,
That's
what we
what
were
I was
told.
brainwashed to believe.
Well, yeah, and I was told that Joseph Smith was a 33rd degree Mason, when he never was. He was third degree, and that's in the Scottish Rite. You know, there's the Blue Lodge, and you have the first three degrees, and then you choose to either go to York Rite or Scottish Rite. Yeah, Masonry kind of begins in the Middle Ages in England and Scotland, and founded in 1717 officially in England.
Well,
Like
and I
a
think it was
fraternity?
to run, yeah, like a fraternity, but I think it was also
Like a
to run
fraternity.
counterculture to the church, because look at how
Yes.
much power the Catholic Church had over pretty much everything in those periods. I mean, they were government, they were religion, they were judge and jury.
Everything.
So people will always find a counterculture to oppression. And that was kind of the movement that started, was this counterculture to that level of oppression. And it was definitely done in secret and brotherly love.
Yes.
So did you really have to be a craftsman in the early days? You had to be in the building trades?
I would
Probably.
say
I would say yes.
It's almost like a union brotherhood or
Yeah.
something.
Exactly. I mean,
it's also like any fraternity too. They do the same, like-minded. They're looking for certain members.
Guild
your father's
is the word that I remember hearing.
if your father's a stonemason, you're more than likely back then going to grow up to be a stonemason, because you're going to do what your dad did. You know, there wasn't much upward mobility at all.
And was it men only?
Yes, it was men only.
In the beginning. Now there's women.
In the beginning. Now there's women. Well, the French started that. I think it was the French instituted. Maybe the British, but Order of the Eastern Star, DeMolay for young men, and can't remember what it is for young women.
Well, Tim, show them that book, because I think anyone who's interested in the history of Freemasonry, this is a great resource, very well researched.
This is Light on Masonry, published by Bernard.
Light on Masonry. And I'm going to include a link to the PDF in the description of our show. And that came out in 1829.
29 in Utica, New York.
Well, I think that's the one thing that appealed to Joseph Smith, is when he discovered Masonry, it definitely took the church into a new world or realm with the secret.
His father was probably a Mason. His brother Hiram was, for sure. A lot of the early members of the church were. Heber Kimball was, and others.
In fact, Hiram's name was spelled Hiram, just like in
Hiram Abbott
in Masonry.
Yep.
They changed the spelling once they started to distance themselves from Masons.
The Masons have symbols that represent the organization in the form of the compass,
and the square,
ruler, and the square, which happen to be the symbols that the LDS have on their garments that they wear. So Do you think that Joseph Smith pilfered the ritual of the temple ceremony from the Masons?
Absolutely. I would say.
And the Masons either patterned
Okay,
or used other things that were going on around
them.
initiations and stuff.
What the Masons did in the 1717 that could go back to the Middle Ages, maybe things they learned from the Crusades. It may go back that far, but we don't know. That's speculation. Let's talk about what's going on in Nauvoo. Why did Joseph Smith have to keep people quiet? What was the number one thing going on in Nauvoo? That Joseph
Polygamy.
Smith was okay. So Joseph Smith goes and forms the Anointed Quorum. Members of the Anointed Quorum were polygamists. Not all of them were. So the only reason that the endowment was created was to put these people under secrecy, to keep
The inner circle.
them quiet, to keep the inner circle. It had nothing to do with redemption of the dead, or anything else. It had to do with keeping their mouths shut, to keep polygamy a secret.
Who could swear their allegiance to Joseph?
To Joseph Smith, that's right. Because there was no Peter, James, and John. Brigham Young added that. There were things that Brigham added to the endowment. But basically, you swore your allegiance. Who's God's representative on earth in Nauvoo? It's Joseph Smith. So basically, they swore their allegiance to Smith. He's the
believe
bridge.
that in the Mason ritual, in their initiatory, if you will, they use a lot of the blood oath, throat cutting type
Yes.
stuff.
Handshakes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yes, in order to maintain that very secrecy that Joseph was trying to maintain.
Signs
right.
and tokens.
Yes.
Yep.
Well, and that definitely was considered a blood oath. You did not break that, or punishment of death, having your tongue ripped out, having your bowels
Split.
Yep.
Yep.
severed. I mean, those weren't just things that were said. Those were things were very much believed, and it was definitely different times where, a mob would come and get you and pull you out of your house and tar and feather your ass.
Yeah.
If they were doing it to Joseph on that end, he was definitely doing it to his supposed enemy as well.
Yeah, like I never thought I'd ever be tarred and feathered for being a Mormon, but I thought I might be made fun of for not drinking Coke, and that would be my persecution.
Huh.
Have you ever been tarred and feathered, Gene?
No, but I've been made fun for not drinking Coke.
Really?
Yeah. When I was young.
Wow.
Well, yeah, so I think Tim is right. The correlation is the secrecy of the act of polygamy, because that was the ultimate secret, and that's what caused him to burn down the printing press, is because ex-members were then leaving and exposing the polygamy. And even back then, that was a horrifying concept of
That's right.
plural wifery. It was not accepted with anyone with a brain. I will say that it was abhorrent.
And another part of the secret and death oaths are related to counterfeiting. There was some counterfeiting going on around then.
Of currency?
Yes.
Yeah.
There was
So
also
actually-
piracy on the river. There was a lot of criminal activity in Nauvoo.
Do it in the name of God, and
And
it's
you know
over.
what? If you have a bunch of people that want to be close to God and want to be nice to their neighbor and bend over backwards for other neighborly people, and there's a criminal element knows that there's people like that, they're going to want to join. The same
Right.
thing happens nowadays with all the abuse that has been occurring. If it
Yeah.
doesn't create it, at least it creates a hotbed for that activity.
Well, and that's why I think the misconception that the church was so persecuted. Oh, these poor saints, they just wanted to be following God, is total BS, because they were, like you said, they were their own criminal enterprise, running their own side gig outside of what would be considered ethics or government or, good faith. There was definitely a secret element to Joseph. And I don't think anyone's ever really given or written a fair book on what that would be like living next to a group like that. It's almost like living next to a cartel or a gang where they basically control the neighborhood. They control the industry. They control who can buy things, who can say things. That is full on.
Who could stay in the city and who couldn't? Who they drive out with the whistling whittlers?
Yeah, their own little mafia.
Yes.
I mean, even today's world, we wouldn't want to be in an environment like that. It definitely put people against you and them, us versus them kind of mentality. So I think that's why you saw that group so persecuted, was because they were really criminal. And with the layer of polygamy on top, which was.
And Randy Bell was recently on Mormonish, and he talked about how the Heaven's Gate cult behaved, and he does it in a bigger picture of what types of things happen around cults. There's money involved, sex, and power. And if you think about it, the what is more powerful than saying you are Jesus or you have his brain or whatever, the guy in charge of the Heaven's Gate, or Joseph Smith saying Jesus talks to me, right?
That's right.
Let me tell you what he has, what his message is, right?
Look at
that he's coming soon.
These people were told that when they went to Missouri, they would be waiting for Christ and that he would return to Missouri.
So they're willing to donate their money, their time, and everything they have to the cause.
They get kicked out of Missouri and they go to Nauvoo. And Joseph tells them, if you build a temple, Jesus will come here. They really believed that Christ was going to come back to Nauvoo, to the temple. Something that's not talked about a lot, but that's why they built the temple, because they thought Christ was going to come back and save them, redeem them.
And do you know when the scripture came out where Joseph Smith was told by God, he says, that he will come if Joseph makes it to his 84th year or whatever? Do you know when that scripture was actually received?
It's in the Doctrine and Covenants.
If it was during Nauvoo, if you think about it.
Yeah, it was during Nauvoo, yes.
So if it was during Nauvoo, you think about it, he's been telling people Jesus will come to Missouri. Jesus will come to Nauvoo. He's now in Nauvoo. He's the general. He's the mayor. He's the richest man in the county or whatever. He doesn't want to die, right? He doesn't want Jesus to come. So what does he do? He has a revelation that says, oh, yeah, 40-something years from now, maybe Jesus will come. Now he gets to be the richest guy, the mayor, the general for 40 more years and living a life of luxury, so he thought.
With women, with young girls.
With all the women he could get.
Because he had that timely revelation.
Yeah.
And it's just like, that's a telling scripture. If that really was in 1843, that's just, and then so even though after he dies, I know lots of Mormons did the math and they thought Jesus was going to come.
Well, that's why they signed the manifesto.
1888. And so they signed a manifesto in 1890, figuring that Jesus was going to come. Brigham Young did the retrenchment in the late 1850s because he was wondering why Jesus hadn't come yet. It's all, you can get people to do so many hard things by telling them Jesus is right around the corner. And we're seeing that today.
That's right.
And the numbers are dwindling, so let's rekindle that fire about Jesus Christ coming.
And Randy and I recently interviewed a lady who grew up as a prepper, and she noticed, even as a young age, every fall she was told as a kid, we're going to have to move later this year when Jesus comes, and you're not going to have friends anymore. Every year she was told that this is the last year of the life as we know it, right? Everything's going to change. Jesus is going to, and she was like, after 7 or 8 years of this, she was like, that doesn't make any sense. You keep on doing the same thing over and over again, like a broken record, and nothing comes true to what you're saying. And so that actually helped her decide to do a move beyond belief for a little while. But still, she came back once she got married and got sealed in the temple, because that's all she knew. It could have been, the church could still be true, but her parents were doing it wrong. They were too Mormon for their own good. Much like who? Chad Daybell, Lori Vallow, Jody Hillebrand, Jody Hillebrand's client,
Ruby.
Ruby Frankie, right? And the Lafferty brothers.
Yeah.
All these people that are trying to be better Mormons than other Mormons, it seems like end up doing some bad things. And then everybody else says, oh yeah, we're not those type of Mormons. We're not the bad type of Mormons.
When I was in the language training mission, before I went to Spain on my mission, we were taught that several of us would live to see the second coming of Christ, and that we would be instrumental in his return. You know, guess what? I'm no spring chicken, and I'm getting up there in age, and
all our kids were told that they were the chosen generation to usher in Jesus.
Yep. I think every generation is told that. I know you're a lot older than I am, Gene. So
that's right, and that's what that's one thing that Randy Bell talked about, is that the feeling of being special, of having special knowledge, being a special person, somebody who Jesus has chosen to, launch his return. That makes people do very strange, wild things, like maybe sell all your belongings and get in a wagon and go across the United States, even sometimes.
Yeah.
But it's an amazing tale of bravery and everything still. But anyway, back to Joseph Smith and Freemasonry. He became a Mason, and then soon thereafter the temple endowment comes. And so that's one thing about Bill, is he says some crazy things, but there's so many crazy things that are true. It makes you wonder, right? Just like the Godmakers movie, right? Mormons would say, oh, they're spreading anti-Mormons lies, right? And even today, do Mormons believe they get their own planet? Oh, no Mormons believe they get their own planet. That is a cartoon rendition of what the true belief is. The true belief is we get to be like Heavenly Father.
It's still in the temple.
What does Heavenly Father has? Oh, he has this planet.
Exactly. Like under the other worlds that we have heretofore created.
Right.
What is that? It's still in the temple, and people don't even get it.
Is there any language like that in Freemasonry?
No.
Not that I can think of.
They don't promise you
so the temple endowment is Freemasonry mingled with Scripture.
Yeah. I'm sure that was more of a Brigham thing that he threw in there.
And there's also apocryphal teachings and different things that we're finding more and more about that are in not Arthur C. Clarke's Bible commentary, but Adam Clarke's Bible commentary.
Arthur C. Clarke's.
Arthur C. Clarke, or what's his name, that did a lot of the space movie type thing, as Isaac Asimov.
Asimov.
I would have liked to hear their Bible commentary. Maybe
right.
They did on the side. Who knows?
Well, and I think if you look at the early belief of the church, not only was Jesus coming again, but that the Constitution would hang by a thread, and that it would be the Mormons who saved America and have dominion over this land. So they definitely took it a notch up to where they were basically kind of overthrowing the government, or going to step in and become the government once the government failed to deliver. And I think that's kind of definitely gone by the wayside. But I know that was definitely talked about in my early education, Sunday schools, of like, oh, it's going to be the Mormons who save America kind of mentality. And that definitely stemmed from those early church members. And that's why, Joseph even ran for president. I mean, he was in it to win it. That's for sure.
Yeah.
The first president was a Mason, George Washington.
A lot of presidents have been Masons.
Yeah, there were 5 Mormon prophets who were Freemasons.
Yes.
After Jesus.
Yeah.
But then even Tim's pointing out, they got banned from joining any fraternal order until, what was it, 1980, Tim?
I think it was the 80s, yeah. Because there was no Brigham Young didn't do any making Masons once they got to Utah. And when Johnson's army showed up, they formed a lodge. And the Masons, if I remember right, the Masons decided they weren't going to let any Mormons become Masons, and they changed it in the 80s, if I remember right.
Deb, you alluded to the fact that Masonry doesn't make reference to religious stuff, but is Christianity, is Christ ever, has that ever been a part of Freemasonry?
Well, they definitely use a version of the King James Bible.
Yeah.
To be a Freemason, I know for Scottish, you have to believe in a universal higher power, or God, but it's not regulated to a denomination. And when you go through the ritual or through the lodge or the temple, it's a ritual done for the brotherhood or the good of the cause or whatever the order is. It's not done with the intent of the ritual being for God, if that makes sense. It's a ritual done for the cause or the brotherhood. So you're committing yourself to those. For all intensive purposes, Masons thought they were going to help elevate humanity out of whatever current situation they were suffering from. And like the early Masons, it was from oppression from the Catholic Church and the dominion and control that the church had over people's lives. So that's why that definitely took root or had hold. And I think that's why it was always secretive, is because it was people of a like mind banding together and saying, well, we don't believe this, but we can't tell anyone, so we're going to keep it secret and protect each other from this oppressive thing and look out for each other's backs, as far as, business or industry or talent. And you see that with any other group. I mean, you see it within the Jewish community. You see any community that is being oppressed definitely find a way to have their own secrets. And I think that's why it really appealed to Joseph Smith, is because he definitely had some secrets. I don't think his align with the nature or the order of what Freemasonry is. It was definitely polygamy, crime, counterfeiting, and a lot of shenanigans like that he needed absolute loyalty to, put some roots in.
Do people have to pass through, Tim, you mentioned they have to do certain things to become a Mason. Does Shriners come into this?
That's after the Blue Lodge. Yeah, Shriners are another offshoot of Masonry. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And I think definitely during the day, my grandpa was a Freemason and so was my grandmother. It was very much a social order. It was a place where you found commonality with a certain group of people who thought and believed like you. If you couldn't find that in a religious community, you could definitely find it other places. And I think that's still true today.
Yeah.
I can be a part of a book club, if I want. Everyone likes to find a niche or something. And I think the commitment that the Masons show to each other was appealing because it definitely is a brotherhood, and they definitely kind of promise to protect each other's backs, so to speak, which is what, Joseph did in his rituals.
Yep.
I think he just took it and ran counterculture to what it was because it fit his narrative. It fit the narrative of needing to keep things secret. So I don't think the endowment was originally like a saving ordinance even for Joseph. I think it was
not at all.
Next level of super cool club in the club,
That's why he had to create the second anointing. Because become super cool, super cool, super cool. Oh, cut your second anointing. You're calling elections to make sure you're going to go to the celestial kingdom. Now it's guaranteed.
the Masons, well, they were smarter. They put the marks on a ring that they could wear around instead of underwear that they had to wear. I don't think the Mason group, the Freemasons, were not considered a cult, were they?
No. They were considered a danger to America, though, at one time because of the anti-Masonic party.
Oh.
Yeah.
I guess one idea might be that American democracy is every man, we'll say, and later women for themselves, right? Study out things, have your own independent vote. And
right.
The only thing they wanted for people to group to would be the political parties, because those were out in the open.
That's right.
But the Masons would be secret groups, and who knows who they were going to support or what direction they were going to take.
Well, if it weren't for the lodge at Valley Forge, America wouldn't exist.
True.
All the Masons who were founding fathers, I mean, there were 20 or 30, I can't remember the exact number, but, Franklin and Washington and the ones that got together to talk about how they were going to found America. So something good did come out of it.
Yeah.
But
I think that's why there's been that anti-Masonic sentiment, is because people were afraid that they would have more loyalty to a lodge than to upholding the Constitution or whatever, so they got persecuted in that regards. Just like the Catholics did. People were afraid, when Kennedy ran, that he'd be more faithful to the Vatican than to America.
Yeah.
People worried.
And the same with Mitt Romney. They were afraid he was going to be more loyal to Mormons, or that he answered to a higher God than, or power than.
Well, in their defense, he would have answered to a higher God, and I don't know that he was able to keep his religion out of it, but I don't know.
Yeah, Mitt.
Yeah, Mitt.
Who?
Mitt Romney.
Mitt couldn't have, no.
I didn't think so. By the way, I did wear my occult shirt today.
I love it.
Okay.
If I could just get a thumbs up on that. Thank you, Deb.
What is it? I can't tell.
It's
skulls
and skulls.
Crosses. Okay.
Yep.
I'm wearing my occult ring. You'll like that, Randy.
Oh boy.
Nice.
Oh boy.
Great minds think alike. Well,
channel the power. I'm just kidding.
You have the power.
I did not come unprepared.
Wow.
When I was in the funeral home business, this was all on my desk.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
And then I moved my desk to my home after the funeral.
Wow.
Are there any more claims you want to debunk, Tim, about Bill, Dr. Bill?
Well, everything. Regarding the church, he said that he went to the temple and he was told to say something. Well, first of all, it's 1980. Well, but he joined the church in 1980. He claims he goes into the temple and he shows them a recommend with a strip on it. That didn't happen in 1980. It didn't happen until the 90s, 2000s. I don't know. I haven't been since 2001.
Deb, you were in the temple last
They go to the temple. They meet Faust, and they see a girl getting raped on the altar of the temple. Some naked girl getting raped. That's all a lie.
Was that part of his interview from the original show?
Yeah. Yes.
It was in our show. But I've heard of crazy things.
He claims he was an elders quorum president, and that he worked 40 hours a week as the elders quorum president. When he had his job, he worked 40 hours at his job and 40 hours as the elders quorum president. And then when somebody couldn't do their home teaching, he did it for them. He visited all the people during the week, and he helped the bishop out.
We know that would never happen.
That never happened. Look at.
I'll just say that in all my callings, I felt guilty that I didn't work 40 hours a week. But
I was in and out of elders quorum presidency from the age of 22 till 40, I was either in an elders quorum presidency, or a ward clerk, or exec sec, or an elders quorum president. I mean, those are basically the jobs I had from the time of my mission until they kicked me out. I mean, I was with Cub Scouts when they kicked me out. I didn't do 40 hours a week. I didn't do home teaching. I mean, I did home teaching, but I didn't do it for everybody else. They didn't do it. All the guys' claims are outlandish.
Well, and I think if you want to study Freemasonry, there's a lot of great books. Tim pointed one, and that's really historical and interesting because it goes through a lot of the true history of it. Also, if you like the Mormon connection, like Lindsay Hansen Park has done some really amazing deep dives on how Freemasonry influenced Joseph and influenced, the early rituals of the church. So I think there's plenty of other people who have done it better, and they're not claiming to also be, a wannabe Catholic priest, a vampire, an ex-Satanist. The guy that has a pretty fantastical level of woo-woo going on. And that's where I think you should always be skeptical, is when someone's making outlandish.
He wants to be everything to everybody.
He's every woman.
What was the name of was it a book that you just quoted, Deb, or the author? You just gave a name about a book.
Oh, I was saying Lindsay Hansen Park has done some great research. But what was the book you showed, Tim? The name of that one again?
Light on Masonry, by David Bernard. They got a temple recommend, which is like a card that allows you to go to the temple because you're not allowed to go unless you're worthy. Went to the Salt Lake Temple. He's supposedly this secret word he got from this Grand Master Druid.
Well, I think if he went to the Salt Lake Temple during that time, he would have definitely known more about the blood oaths, and also the fact that Satan back in those days, during the live session, would wear a black Masonic apron. He could have made it more.
No, it wasn't black. It was blue with black writing.
Okay, sorry, got the color. Yeah,
but
it was not the green. It was not the green. But no. I think he would have had some more of those details that would have definitely solidified those truth claims of having done that.
So he made that up. And he put these words in the computer. We were told to say these words, and when we put these words into the computer after our card, the whole system crashed. What the fuck? Were there even computers in the temple in 1981?
I didn't know that what he meant when he said that, by the way, Tim. I'm like, what are you talking about? You say certain words and that's supposed to make the computers crash?
Yeah, right? Exactly. I
wish I knew those words.
There were no computer. Well, maybe there was. I mean, PCs were brand new in 1981.
Yeah.
We didn't get them at BYU until 82 or 83, 84 when we had the PCs.
That was the floppy disk era, guys. We're talking
floppy disk era. Right. 5 1/4-inch discs, not the 8 inches, 5 1/4. Okay, so that's and then he's
quarter for you, 8 inches for me.
Ha ha ha.
I'm surprised Gene didn't come up with that one first.
Okay, and then he says that Joseph Smith was a Mason in 1844. It's not. It was March 1842. He was made a Master Mason, and that's okay. He got that right. Okay, and he stole the ritual. He didn't steal the whole ritual. He stole the signs and tokens. And then he talks about the video he created. We were invited to go meet the president of the Salt Lake Temple, which is kind of a big deal. Now, who, after they go through the temple for the first time, is invited to go see the temple president? So he's placing himself as a big deal. Like, how would you know who it was, even? And I said, we've been told, we didn't say by a druid, but we've been told that we need to talk to an apostle. Now understand there's this hierarchy. The prophet is the president, and then there's the 12, etc., etc. So he arranged for us to go to the church office building and meet with one of the 12. And who does he go meet with? James Faust. Why do you think he used the name Faust?
Because of the Faustian.
Deal with the devil, right? It's a very prominent name in church history, or the name of the occult. Okay, true. So he
I'm going to
picks
predict in
James.
50 years, the church is going to call him Frederickson, Apostle Frederick, James E. Frederickson.
Yeah,
Just wipe
or
the Faust
something
name
like
out.
that. So he claims to go to the church office building.
Yeah, so the main thing is, Tim, you had experience. You knew that
Go on.
Gerald and Sandra Tanner refuted some of their things.
What do you think about the upside down stars that you find on the Salt Lake Temple?
Salt Lake Temple and the
is
Nauvoo
that?
Temple.
Pentagram.
As above, so below. As above, so below. That's taken from Masonry. So, I mean, the guy.
And you know how some people say that, black magic works or whatever. And it's almost, if you believe anything, you can convince yourself to do more than you might otherwise. Just like a high school athlete, the coach says, "Hey, you can do this. I know it." And then, we've trained you, or does a halftime locker room talk, right? And gets everybody whipped up into a religious frenzy to go beat the other team. And the underdog can win that way sometimes, right?
So, and he makes the endowment sound like degrees, and the endowment ceremony isn't like Masonic degrees. You don't go from one degree to the other. You're taught everything all in one sitting. You're given the signs and tokens and penalties.
Well, the Salt Lake Temple, you went from room to room.
From room to room.
The terrestrial room to the
celestial to the celestial.
Celestial to terrestrial to celestial, right?
Yeah. The first floor, the second floor, and the third floor.
I can see where you can equate that to levels or, degrees of glory, right? Get it?
Okay, yes.
Inflated.
Possibly, yes. So
that way.
Like in Freemasonry, it's almost like a rite of passage. Where in Mormon doctrine, it is like you walking through their version of heaven, the celestial world, the telestial world, and then into the celestial world, which you don't find that anywhere else. That 3-level kingdom is definitely niche to Mormonism.
That's right. And telestial is a word that Joseph Smith made up the word telestial, and if it's in a dictionary, it'll say the only thing is that Mormons use it.
Really?
It was never a word.
I didn't know that. I mean,
what was never a word?
Telestial.
That's right. Not until Joseph came up with it. Yeah. And then he talks about going to the veil and how it comes from Masonry, which is true. The 5 points of fellowship does come from Masonry. That's when they raise you up with the bear claw. When you raise Hiram Abbott, that's part of the ceremony.
So I'll put in some links to in the description to some of the things that you sent us, Tim, and we'll let people do some more, and everybody can do their own research. And like Randy and I mentioned, we're doing it for entertainment purposes. It's just information. It's neither good nor bad. It's just somebody's experience. And
it wasn't his experience at all. It was all lies. And he got everything.
He was on mushrooms. If you have a trip on mushrooms, did you experience something?
He was on the Lori
tell a difference.
High. She was talking to Jesus. You start convincing yourself of some weird stuff. You have definite cognitive disconnect.
Don't they say like the person, the man or woman that runs through some place screaming and they're naked and they're high on some drug, whatever those people are on, that it must work. It's really convincing them that they need to run around naked and
sure, right.
So they're experiencing it, even though we're not experiencing the same thing. And
I walked around the hotel lobby one time on a trip I was on. I had taken Ambien,
Oh,
My friend called my room and asked if I had a phone charger that she could borrow. And I said yes. And in my underwear, I walked through the hotel lobby to her room and showed up, just my underwear. And she said, "What in the hell are you doing?" And I said, "You wanted a phone charger?" And so it happens. I'm telling you, it could, maybe he believes it happened to him, but
Right.
yeah.
You swear you had pants on when you left your room, right?
You know, I don't even remember leaving my room. I just know that she got my charger and she told me how, but I showed up to her room in just my undies. I
You
thought
were
that
thinking,
was really
she was
classy.
thinking that you were thinking of a different type of charger. Going to charge her up.
The
it wouldn't be one of these podcasts if we didn't end with a good Randy story and a good Gene
I mean,
joke.
That's right.
but this guy's worldview is so skewed and just so.
Yeah, I mean, he says that he was 1 year away from having his soul claimed by Satan.
Yeah,
And there's a lot of stuff that we would say is not reality. To some people, Harry Potter is reality, but it's not, right? It's just a book, just a movie. But
He definitely has a niche. She got us talking about him.
some
Yeah.
people will worship those things.
yeah.
So anyway, thanks, Tim, and thanks, Debbie, for coming on and
But when
chatting away about this.
okay,
And we could do more shows later. We could actually have this as a and talk about Tuesdays with Tim.
okay,
Now,
Tim, I have one question for you before we go.
okay.
Do you consider Bill to be a liar?
Yes,
Okay.
that's right. In case that wasn't clear, you wanted to.
it wasn't.
You wanted to-
Anything the man, I do not believe anything the man says. I don't believe.
except for his
Yeah.
name is Bill. Do you believe that?
Possibly the only, like I told Debbie, the only honest ex-Mormons that I know of are the Tanners, and they always have been. They don't pull any punches, and when they make a mistake, they admit about it. Like they exposed DJ Nelson, who was a supposed Egyptian expert. They exposed Bill Schnoebelen. They exposed. They exposed. I mean, they even exposed the guys who made the God Makers, Ed Decker and his partner, how bad they were. So
Don't mess with the goat.
don't mess with the goats,
And I
because the
blanked out
Tanners
for a
know.
second. Did you say that they exposed Mark Hoffman?
Yeah, I was okay. MHA.
You were 1 degree of separation from Mark
Well,
Hoffman.
I met Mark Hoffman, but I was visiting my parents in Colorado Springs. I was going to MHA in Independence. I got on the plane in Denver. I walk in, I'm sitting down. There's Gerald and Sandra. There's all these MHA guys that I knew. And Gerald hands me this pamphlet that he made about the Hoffman Later, where everything came from on it. And so I read it on the way to Missouri. And I was sitting with, I can't remember who I was sitting next. We were talking about stuff. But, yeah, so Gerald knew before. Gerald was always ahead of the curve on a lot of things.
I'll agree with that.
Yeah.
Deb, if you'll show up at Tuesdays with Tim this week, I'll tell you why I saw Tina Turner in her underwear.
All right. I work until 8:00. I'm doing a cocktail party and then I'll be done. So hopefully I'll be able to jump on.
Nice.
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Because Deb had made a reference to Tina Turner earlier, and I
Yes.
said, well, I was her bodyguard, and I've seen her in her underwear.
I
And
saw that comment and I'm like, I want this story.
her and Cher together in their underwear. Yep, I saw it. I was there. I tried not to look, but Tina called me over and said, "You come over here. You're our bodyguard." So, she said something to the effect that this is nothing you haven't seen before. So, yeah, That's my claim to fame. I saw her in her underwear.
Wow.
Well, I'll be there Tuesday with Tim. I want to hear it.
Okay.
Sounds good. Sounds like fun.
That was just a little commercial, Gene, for Tuesdays with Tim.
Yeah. And Tim, did you want to talk about the LGBTQ, the history of LGBTQ in the Mormon Church this Tuesday?
Not just the Mormon Church.
Or just everything, just the whole history?
I think, yeah. I think
Okay.
prominent people.
So we'll air this show just before Tuesdays with Tim, and hope it gets a few more Tuesdays with Tim viewers. And that'll be the tease. There's a couple teases in there. And everybody have a great rest of 2025, and see you at Tuesdays with Tim and other
Take care.
cats.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
guys.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.